مرحبا، شكرا لحضوركم اليوم لدارة الفنون. السنة بنحتفل بمرور 30 سنة على دارة الفنون. جزء من البرنامج والمعارض الفنية، 3 معارض فنية على مدار العام، منهم أول معرض افتتحناه بداية السنة اللي موجود حواليكم، ومشارك فيه برضه ضيفنا اليوم جوانا حادجيتوماس وخليل جريج. أول شيء اللقاء بده يكون بالإنجليزي، بس طبعا أي مداخلة، أي أسئلة، أي مساعدة في الترجمة إحنا موجودين. بدي بس أقرأ سيرة قصيرة للفنانين. يتحدث الفنانين حول تجربتهما الفنية التي تمتد على مدار عقود، ويستعرض الفنانان اللذان حصلا على جائزة مارسيل دوشامب بال 2017 تنوع أساليبهم الفنية من فن الفيديو والأفلام الوثائقية الدرامية والفن متعدد الوسائط. أخرج الثنائي معا عددا من الأفلام، منها خيام 2000-2007 والفيلم المفقود 2002. وعلى مدار الشهر عرضنا في دارة الفنون فيلم بدي شوف وفيلم نادي الصواريخ اللبناني، كما أنجزا عددا من الإنشاءات الفوتوغرافية منها وجوه وصور باقية، وعرضا أعمالهما الفنية متاحف وقاعات عرض حول العالم، منها متحف وطن الفن المعاصر في باريس والجوجنهايم في نيويورك ومتحف بومبيدو في فرنسا، وأكيد من برامج ومعارض دارة الفنون. بدي أنقل الحديث لزميلتي إيلين فاندر فليست المديرة الفنية بدارة الفنون، وراح تكمل الحديث بالإنجليزي. وزي ما حكيت أي مداخلة.
بالبداية مرحبا فيكم في بلاد الشام، بلدكم في المملكة الوطنية الهاشمية. بإمكانية التحدث بالعربية لأهلنا بلبنان.
يعني الحديث بشكل أساسي رح يكون بالإنجليزي، بس أي مداخلات، أي أسئلة مستعدين الفنانين يجاوبوا عليهم بالعربي.
استقبال الرسائل يعني
رح يكون في مجال أكيد بالعربي.
محاطين الترجمة ما بإمكانية؟
لا ما في. شكرا لحضورك.
اعتمد على المعنى الواحد مش.
طيب خلينا نبلش اللقاء. شكرا.
لا، في مشكلة صغيرة بس حتى نحل بعد دقيقة ماشيين فيه، ما عم نفهم شو عم بيصير، بس كان ماشي بس على حظنا. لحظة. طيب عملوا المقدمة. طب
بآخر شيء بدي أنوه إنه أصدرنا الكتيب الخاص بالمعرض الفني الأول موجود بالقاعة على اليمين والمتطوع، في البرنامج اللي حصل واللي حيصير بالشهر القادم، وفي طبعا معلومات أكثر وتفاصيل عن الفنانين المشاركين وأعمالهم المشاركين في المعرض. شكرا لكم.
Thank you, Ahmed. And sorry, does this work? Yes. Thank you, Ahmed. Welcome to Darat al-Fanoon, and I have a very, very warm welcome for Joana Hadjithomas and Khalil Joreige, artists who we are showing in our current exhibition. I'm very proud to show their project, I Stared at Beauty So Much, the 3 films of which are installed in the halls right next door, and I hope you've had a chance to see it, and if you haven't, that you will have a chance to see it. We will go through their work in a conversation. Please feel free to ask questions. At the end, we will also have an opportunity to ask questions. We will have the conversation in English, as you just understood, but please feel free to ask your questions in Arabic. And if there's anything you want, a little explanation in Arabic, also feel free to ask for those of you who need that. It's my limitation in Arabic that determines this, the language at the moment. Ahmed has already given you a background, a short overview of Joana and Khalil's work. Artists, filmmakers, researchers from Lebanon. Just recently received, as in recognition for their work, the Marcel Duchamp Prize in Paris. I think we'll start by letting them see how they started their practice. They're both not trained as artists and filmmakers. We're in the 1990s, it's the end of the civil war in Lebanon. Beirut is under reconstruction. And then?
Okay, it's working. Okay, we're very happy to be here. First, hello to everyone. And as you said, we can, after our questions, we can have questions in Arabic or French or English, not other languages. We'll try a small little Greek. So yes, we started working, Khalil and me, together from the beginning. It started in an organic way, we can say, because it was in the 90s, it was the end of the civil wars in Lebanon, almost the end of the civil wars. Khalil was taking photography for a long time. He was used to this medium, and at the starting point I wanted to write, but it didn't. It changed a little bit. And so, yes. But so we started first in a city that was at the end of a war, a civil war, and the end of it was very abrupt, and we didn't really understand what happened, but suddenly we felt that everything was between brackets and we had to move to something else. But we had a lot of questions, of anxieties, and we started taking pictures of Beirut and its and especially its center.
At the beginning, we were in a very strange relation to this reality that we were facing, because what we were trying to record the transformation of the city, because the city was destroyed by the reconstruction. It's very weird to understand, but actually there was a real estate project that we call it Solidaire, that decided to destroy the 2/3 of the midtown in order to rebuild another city. So for us, it was also a question of time, of rhythm, because it was going maybe a little bit too fast before we even noticed what was happening. So the first images we were taking was without any preconceived idea, or at least we were not knowing what we were doing. We ended by, after 10 years of making this documentation, by having a lot of difficulty, because we were part of a group of people who were facing the same issues, the same concern. So we started to meet, to discuss, and we were able always to critique the other. So we had at the moment to try the risk to think about our own practice, and this is how it led us to something that we call the archaeology of our gaze. Little by little, we were trying to understand how we were working like this, what we were noticing, what was the changes of the city, what was the relation to the ruins, what was the relation to the violence. And one of the main element that we start to deal with is that we were not very interested in the representation of the violence by itself, but more in what the violence did to the representation, so meaning how the violence affects the images and the representation. So one of the first series in our early work was called Equivalence. So these are 3 equivalents, which is a direct quotation to a photographer called Stieglitz, where he was taking pictures of clouds. The clouds في الرئة مش حرب. هيدي كمان شغل عملنا اسمه distracted bullet على فكرة. So in Stieglitz, when he was taking these clouds, you can take the image and turn it all in all senses. You can rotate it because you don't know, you lose the topography. And this is exactly what was happening with the bombs and its relation to photography. It was something a little bit similar, meaning a bomb will destroy a building and it become upside down. Another quotation to Mahmoud Darwish.
Simple party, bomb.
It's a party? Okay. عم يحتفلوا يعني عم يحتفلوا. Okay, so those were the beginning of our research in images and representation, and we did another series that we called bestiaries. Because when you have like a city that is totally destroyed, you begin shooting and you are in a way fascinated, and little by little you have to question your own fascination and to see that it's not a solution, you cannot aestheticize it, so you have to find a way to deal with it. You want to represent it, you want to document and have traces of it, but in the same time you don't want to do a certain kind of images. So this was one of the first series we did. It's street lamps that are hit by shells and bombarded, and we thought they were showing a kind of very strange bestiaries. And we did a whole series with like a cobra, a rabbit, a dolphin. For us, we represented them like that because we were trying to find a kind of sense to all this absurdity. But very soon we started to think about the representation of Beirut as a city itself, because Beirut is very central to a lot of artworks, a lot of literature, a lot of films, a lot of titles have always Beirut something, you know. So we're questioning this city, and you always hear people say, you know, Beirut is that and Beirut is that. So we were questioning both the representations that we have of a city, the way we can show it, but also what is happening to this city that is totally being fragmented, was fragmented by war and then by reconstruction. And so we did the first project where we took, we took a picture of Beirut, an aerial picture, and we cut it in 3,000 fragments. It was a big picture of 3 meter on 4, and and those fragments, 3 by 4, and those fragments we stamped then the words Beirut does not exist, and we put numbers and people were invited to take a fragment of the picture, and little by little the image would disappear, but behind it there's a mirror. And of course it's all about what you present, how do you present yourself, because of course little by little you are in the mirror.
It's not just about representing the city or in itself, it's how you perceive yourselves as well in this history or story, and particularly in a country like Lebanon where sorry, does this still work or not? Where there is a whole lack of a common history, no, or an agreed on common history.
Yes, of course. This was the way we were thinking, trying to think together, because, as you understand, this is a participative work, and the thing maybe that brought us, Khalil and me, to do what we did and we're still doing is that, as you said, we didn't go to an art school, we didn't do a film school, but we were like very under this impression that there's nothing that is said, we have to raise those questions, like what do we do after a civil war, how do we reconstruct a society, what is the history that is going to be told. No history till today, but in a way. So this is what we started doing.
To continue on what Joana was saying, we used to say that we came to our practices by necessity, meaning we didn't choose to become artists, we were forced to become. It was actually not the will of my parents, definitely not. But we had to face certain issues. We were frightened of things that can start again. We were frightened about all this violence where we went, and we had to deal also with a question, a very simple questioning: where are we today? What can we do with all this? And this leads us also, and that is a questioning that is at the heart of our practices, is that we define ourselves also as a storyteller. And this leads us also to another practice that is very important in our life, which is cinema. And from the beginning, we didn't want to make any separation between art, cinema, performance, life.
And also, apart from that, some of your projects start with one form of medium and then gradually develop into others, or are elements of different performative elements and photography that then end up into a film. But before we go there, so you started to take all these images yourself, and then what you also use in your practice is found or encountered images, and I think that's where we get to the next project. Encountered images, I mean popular images in a way. So it's also found, but more in popular culture, which gets us to wonderful or wonder Beirut.
Khalil and me, we are interested in what construct our imaginaries, and how we represent ourselves, as you understand. And we were, as you were saying, it's never something that we really think about a lot at the beginning, but we encounter something. And here there was, at the end of the war, there were those postcards that were coming back. Those postcards taken from the 60s, showing a Beirut that didn't exist anymore for many reasons, from war, reconstruction. And so we thought of them and we said, what they are representing? If I want to send a postcard to someone, what am I sending, in a way? Because, of course, when you do postcards, you will show an ideal image of your city. So it's in Beirut, it's a hotel, the Riviera, the beach, and a certain kind of representation. So we took those postcards and we thought, why don't we conform them to what is their realities today? And we did the first project, that is the Wonder Beirut project, where we just thought that we will burn them as they are today, hit by shells and bombarded. We will do the same, but we wanted to do it accordingly to a certain history. And so we went and did a lot of research on the war day by day, and we did the first series of based on a battle that occurred in the beginning of the war in 1975-76. That was the battle, yes, the battle of the hotels. And we started doing that, and because we are a filmmaker, we like to say stories and to build characters. We thought of, okay, this would be an incredible thing if the person who took these postcards, let's say a photographer that was commissioned to do those postcards in the end of the 60s, would have to burn them himself because he wants them to represent something about today. So we created this character, Abdallah Farah. And Abdallah Farah became very important in our life, Khalil and me. So first he was burning those postcards, and we called them the historical process, because you can see the postcards burned little by little, and each time we take a picture and we burn them again. And for us it was a way of documenting this moment, because those hotels were being refurbished and all that, and those traces were disappearing. But of course, Abdallah, he started burning them, and he took a kind of pleasure, so he burned others without being very documented. And then we did a lot of postcards, we printed them, and we called them postcards of war, and we distribute them heavily. So each time we are invited to show this work in an exhibition, people can just take them, and we like this idea also. And also in Beirut, we did a lot of them, we distribute them to everyone, and this was this idea of re-questioning the way ideal images and very nostalgic images were bring back after the end of the war, and the war put in bracket nothing happened. Okay, the war started in 1975, ended in 1990s. Okay, guys, this was just a bracket. Everything is okay now.
والإضاءة ليش طفوها والله الإضاءة عليكم؟ أوكي. لا هلا اللي أنا بشوفه بشتت الانتباه يعني. أوكي. يا ريت المسؤول عن بالشاشة تشتت الانتباه، إذا بتخلوها لبعد هذا أفضل.
لا بدك نزيد
الإضاءة مشان حضرتكم.
أوكي.
لا نفضل إنه تطلعوا على الصور ورانا.
Okay, but the mic we try.
يصير تشتت ما بين.
I can like this is better. I can be like a rapper.
that? This is better?
تعطي نعاس ما بتعطي نشاط.
This is more stylish.
ما بتعطي نشاط.
Do it like that. Like that.
Okay.
هي فاتتني بس خليك. اوكي.
فينا نعمل يمكن نحط ضوء صغير علينا من وقت لوقت. هذا الكاركتر of عبد الله فرح, we use it after a while for another practice that we were having in Beirut at that time, without noticing why we were having it. Actually, we were taking a lot of pictures of all the transformation of the city without developing them. So we were. Yeah, it was at that time. Yeah.
We are old enough to have
another. So little by little, we start to think about this practice, about taking images without developing them. We were pushed to take images, but there was no need to see them after. And it led us to start to think about something, a concept maybe, but it's not a concept. It's more a state of something that we have to deal with in Lebanon, is a state of latency. كمون يعني إنه في شيء كامن بلبنان. It's all the things that are present, but the condition of their visibility are not there. Exactly like in photography that is taken, but the condition of its visibility, of its revelation is not there yet. So we start to systematize this practice and to give it according to the character of Abdullah Farah. So Joana and me, because we are also filmmakers, we start to play with a specific camera Abdullah's life, like his fight, his research, his life, and we start to enjoy it and to take notes of all this. It ended by becoming, putting some notes of all this description of the images in some notebooks, and we start to produce what we called, we can't see anything here, contact sheets. So we start to make several contact sheets and to present them in different installation where it's a kind of diary. It's a diary of a photographer where you see in the same time its relation to photography, but to his personal life, to the change of the city. And little by little, this photographer who had a Studio Wahed before the war, tried to make wedding things, and at the end in 2004 start to sell cell phone. Because no more photography.
We did that for like almost 10 years, taking pictures without developing them.
And you call these latent images?
Latent images.
Which is kind of reflective of the state.
But we stopped in 2006.
That's also with the advance of digital camera, I guess, the ubiquity of everyone putting images anywhere, contact sheets.
But it was a way also to think about the medium we are using and how it's developing, how it's changing, and if we need to see those images, or what is the power of an image. Because of course when you are doing images, there's a lot of images around you and more with the digital. So what is the weight of an image, and if we remove the image from the flux, is it gaining more power? So if I don't give a visibility to the image, but I describe it, maybe it will open something in the imagination of the person who will see it. So this is kind of experimentation we did for a very long time. And the thing is, it takes always a lot of forms in what we're doing, just because I think maybe because we didn't study those practice, we don't really have like limitations, and we just say like, what if we do like something with a book or something?
But this is, I think, I think this is an interesting part of your practice. Is there's always this possibility of failure. I think we talked about this earlier today. There's a sense of adventure. You go, Je vais voir, for instance. You go on a road trip. The Rocket Society. It starts with a kind of random encounter or a random found image, or even the project you find this undeveloped film from your uncle. It is, and then it starts the route. But there is not a set ending in your mind yet. Like normally, as a filmmaker, you would find your funding, you have your script, you know, you go from A to Z, and failure is not an option in a way.
It's true. At the beginning, we didn't really think about it. At the beginning, failure was very traumatizing. But little by little, we thought like maybe it's the way we are structured is like that we have to follow something. So follow an encounter, follow an idea, follow a proposition, and this is the way it can start
and
with
a fragility that you
a
can
fragility,
get in the
exactly. So the first time we did that, actually, it was one of the first time it was in Yemen, because we had a film that was stolen in Yemen, our first feature film, and we thought like, oh, why and who would steal one of our films, like in Yemen, our first film? Maybe it was a little bit. I liked in Lebanon, but we cannot say that it was a hit or the hit. So who would steal this film? And so we thought, like, let's go to Yemen to see and to do a kind of inquiry and to try to understand. And of course, Yemen is at that time, it was in 2001. It was a very particular moment, and I was in a way afraid to go to Yemen, but I really wanted to go there, and I thought about with Khalil, like, what is our status as filmmaker in the region? In a way, we could go there and ask this question. So this is one of the accidents that we took, and we made a film, and this film traveled after. And for example, here in Latent Images, we did this art book because someone asked us to do an art book and an artist book, and we said like, oh, this is perfect, let's do it. We always wanted it to be like a real diary, and then we sealed the pages of this book because we wanted this idea of revelation, so you would have to cut the book. And then there's the pages, sorry, and then a museum bought this book and wanted us to cut the pages. So we said, like, we're not going to cut the pages alone. Let's do a kind of meetings with friends who would cut the pages. And so we asked Walid Raad, and our close friends and others to cut the pages. We did a performance. There was Okwi saw the performance, Okwi and Vezor, and invited us to do the same in Venice. You know, it's always like that, you do that.
And Venice to perform it every day. So it's the Biennale was 177 days, so we had to perform it every day during the whole...
We want something epic.
About the epic.
You got something epic.
We want something epic, and then there was like 4 actors every day.
So it leads us to another installation, which is this installation, which is called, which is actually the timeline of the performance, the 177 performance, where every day 2 books were taken from one of these shelves in a timeline. So you have the last day here on the your left. And each time.
So we would bring down 2 books.
So you see here the books that have been opened and those who are sold, and it was a spiral of.
4 actors would open the book, and then the audience would open one also.
So this relation to the latent images is to the latency is not just something that is about. It haunts all our work. It haunts our work, even if sometimes you are doing things for other reasons. Like, for example, for humanitarian reason and militant reason, we were in a committee for the dismantling of a detention camp in South Lebanon, and this camp was at that time in a region that was occupied by Israel. And it was called Khiam. So it was a camp, not a prison, meaning that people who were there were not judged, and they were not knowing for how long that would stay there. They were, of course, in a very, very difficult situation. We had no images about the camp, so we can't have any representation because it was in a place where we cannot go. But we managed to encounter some of them because we knew quite well one of the Just Street. Through their through different encounter, we noticed that during their detention, they managed to produce artworks. And we made a first film called Triam, where we were focusing on how these 6 ex-detainees managed to keep their humanities by producing artworks out of nothing, because they had nothing in their cells. Like Sohab Shara, that you can see there, spent 6 years in a cell, meter by a meter and a half, with really nothing. So they start to produce what they call masbaha. It's made from olive stones, and they took from their socks some threads and start to make this. For example, this is a toothbrush. What is the most important things in the camp is this, a needle. Because they will lose weight, so they will need to make a needle. How you do a needle when you have nothing? This was the chess game of Sohab Shara, who spent, like I told you, 6 years alone in a room. So she started to play chess with herself. What was amazing for us is that during our conversation with them, they described these objects as artwork. They were even saying that they were artists in this detention camp. But before and after that detention, they are not artists. Meaning that the condition of the production can determine what is an object, or is it art or not. You have to imagine that this is very small things, because it was completely forbidden and they had to hide it. And it was sometimes gifts that they made from one detainee to another. Like this small stone that is just 2 centimeters. You were asking a question about failure and things like this. Actually, it's very strange, but because when you are in a specific mood or research or perspective, it happens that you will encounter things that feed you exactly. You don't know why. Suddenly, it's like the reality that it reconfigures itself to be able to show you things that were there, but you don't know why. So we were working for a couple of years on the latency, when suddenly in the archive of my uncle, we found this envelope. My uncle, Alfred Jr. Kettani, was kidnapped in August 1985, and we never found him again. We don't know what happened, we don't found his body, and he's one of the 17,000 missing persons in Lebanon. 17,000, it's a huge number for such a tiny country, and especially when you have no mass grave. Like usually you can imagine that Beirut is a very dense city where you have always real estate projects if there is a place where there is a mass grave, we will find it. And actually, we never found anything. So, in 2001, we discovered this film, and Latent Images is an image that have the possibility of disappearing. There's always a failure, a possibility of a failure, because after a certain time the image can disintegrate and things like this. And this is exactly what happened with the film of my uncle, meaning that it came out veiled, and we had to face the same situation than the family of the missings. Shall I develop it or not? Shall I stay with the hope that there is maybe images there or no? We took the risk of developing it, and it, as you see, veiled. But we decided to scan it completely, all the images, the 4,500 images of this 3-minute film, and to start by color correction, work on contrast and things like this to bring back the images, the lasting images that are still there. And if you look at it carefully, you will notice things that are coming back, like ghosts.
It's like a film witnessing hidden history in a way.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm speechless. That gave me goosebumps.
Talking about failure, this was one of the moments where there's a fragility that you have to accept, even in the material, because something can happen. And for example, we continue this research by doing a kind of image with all those scans of the 4,500 frames of a 3-minute film. With this work that is called, it's a little bit not very clear, but I hope you can see it. And it's this work that we called 180 seconds of lasting images, with this idea of images that are very fragile because we cut them, they are almost white, but you really have to come closer if you want to see. And at the same moment, we were working on a feature film called Perfect Day. So on this idea, this very inspired by the story of Khalil's family.
And I think we can talk a bit about your filmmaking and practice, and particularly the way you approach the process of filmmaking.
When we started working on films, we did a film that was, we did a script, we had producers, it was our first film, but we were like we didn't really understand how to work in films, so we went in the shooting. It was a huge
around
film,
the Pink House.
Around the Pink House, and we were with Khalil were like, we have to say action now. We have to say cut. It was really crazy, and we jumped into the pool because suddenly we had to do the film, and then after we were like a little bit traumatized by the experience, and we did like Khiam with $2,000, and we thought like this is better for us. It's we can control everything, and then we started doing other kind of films where we had like the film of we did in Yemen, but the last film.
Which was again around
about
the Pink House that was
stolen, and about story kept secrets. And this is something we worked a lot on. And when we had to do this film, A Perfect Day, we thought like maybe we can find a medium solution, a middle solution, and maybe we can find a way to do films that is different. So we thought about, we didn't have a lot of money for this film. We wrote a script, and there was two things that were very important in our practice as filmmaker at that moment. First, this idea that we won't reconstitute reality because we don't need to do that. There is a reality that is just here. If we need to do a shot in a traffic jam or in Hamra Street or in Corniche, we just have to go with our, or in nightclubs and to films with a story. So you would have like part that is scripted and the rest people, of course, that we ask for authorization, but afterward. So we had like it was very intense and very interesting because there was like a kind of fiction in a documentary mood in a way. So, and then we thought like, why do we have to give the script to actors? Let's just tell them the story a little bit, and they would be better than us in a way because their interaction would give something more interesting. And we were talking about the fragility, and this is something that for us is very important to keep this, when you do an artwork, this fragility, this moment where you lose control and something else happens. And you have to take this risk because here there are accidents and there are very beautiful things that can occur.
And what I like in your films also, the process is very visible in the films themselves, the process of the filmmaking. You are visible on camera, I mean in the Lebanese Rocket Society, in Je Vais Voir. You're getting permissions is visible, your research is part of the film.
It depends on the film. For example, in Perfect Day, of course, we were not visible at all. But in Je Veux Voir or in the Lebanese Rocket Society, it was very specific why we show the process and why we are visible. Because in a way, those are two films that are talking about how you negotiate when you feel that your territory is shrinking. For example, for Je Veux Voir, of course, it was just after the 2006 war. And we felt that it was something that we couldn't film in so many places, and so many things have changed. And we were very frustrated because during that war, a lot of images were shown and nothing happened. So we asked ourselves, like, people are kind of used to some images, can we change this perspective? And so we had this strange idea to ask a kind of icon, Catherine Deneuve, that became Catherine Deneuve after, for us. The choice I could explain later, and ask her to be in a place where you cannot imagine her. And what happened, it's like a chemical accident, something. She would go to south of Lebanon just after the war with Rabbi Amrou. She represents a certain idea of cinema, a certain history at a moment where you feel that you are in a gap, you are just after a catastrophe and you need just something to hang on to. And Rabbi Amrou, who is you know him, of course, he's a great artist, a great performance, and a great friend. And so we thought like he would represent the history of our generation and what we try to do and maybe we fail to do or not or whatever. And so we did this film, and this film was in a way renegotiating another territory that is not a territory of nationalities, of geography, but more a territory of art and how we can ask those questions.
I think one of my favorite moments is at the almost end of the film when Rabia and Catherine go to walk towards that road, that's the last road in Lebanon, before the Israeli border. And you clearly got special permission, or that's what they're saying. And they encounter this, is it a hole in the road or a crater hole? And what do we do? And they turn around, and you turn the shot around, and there's this guy in black, and suddenly it's the film crew. it was, for me, that was
This place where it was what started the film and our desire to make the film, because we when the 2006 war ended, we went with Khalil and did some images, and we put a tripod in this exact place, and there was like a big problem. Everyone came, and Israeli, Hezbollah, army, UNIFIL, everyone like took us, and like it was really very, very sudden. And we thought like, why don't we humiliating a little bit also? And we thought like, why can't we put a tripod here? And so what make it possible to put a tripod here? And so this is how we thought about like crew, cinema, an icon, a star, and maybe this could happen. And open a road, but we couldn't.
And it ruptures the road, the road movie vibe that you.
But we didn't really know that if this road would open and if we would have permission. This is what is filmed in the film, also.
The film is also about the notion of rupture. It's how we can, after such a catastrophe, how we can reconfigure ourselves. It can be, because it's a rupture in our history, but maybe we can reconfigure itself by invoking another history, be it the history of cinema. So this is why also invoking the history of cinema was important. So 2006 was really a change in our practice. Before that, we were trying to work on showing certain complexity, showing certain states. This is why the project of Latent Images stopped in 2006. And after that, another kind of work started, which was linked to what Joana was saying, this negotiation in the real, where because your territory was shrinking, you have to find a setup, a display even, to try to fight for another representation. And this what led us also after this one to another project that we made just after. It's called the Lebanese Rocket Society. Actually, this project, we worked, Joana and me, in projects, meaning that we worked during certain years on one topic, we dig in it, we made our research, and after when we start to find certain answers, at least, we try to shift to another. Because there is some topics that are always present. One of the topics is how you can believe in an image, how you can believe in a story. Like for Catherine Deneuve, it's a direct quote to Notre Musique and, from Godard, where he was saying about the Palestinian, like in certain images, the Palestinian enters the documentary and the Israeli, the fiction. So here, with Catherine Deneuve, after a war, the question becomes much more complex. Like Catherine Deneuve is a fiction by itself. What can she play in Lebanon? How can this relation between fiction and documentary can be replaced? And after working on all this project and all the project of Qiyam 2007, we ended by remembering an episode that Joana's sister told us in 2001, actually, when she was doing a CD-ROM at that moment of the history of Lebanon, that there was a space project in Lebanon. And a space project in Lebanon, for everybody, it was a joke. Nobody was remembering, nobody was even believing in, like, we didn't invent a toaster, how come we can invent rockets for space exploration? But after a long research, we started to found that this project actually, because at the beginning it was drawing, so we always imagined that in a drawing it's an exaggeration. But when we start to find these images, we start to believe that this project may be a little bit more serious than what it was. And so the Lebanese Rocket Society started to become a project, a film, but also several artwork. If you imagine a rocket in the Lebanese, in Lebanon, you will always consider that it's a missile.
Missile.
To word described specifically. But for this person, it was more a peace project because it was made.
Okay. So maybe we just to give some context to people who doesn't really know the project. It's a project that happened during 7 years in Lebanon, between 1960 and 1967. It was a mathematics professor, Manoukian, who wanted at the Hadjithomas University to explain propulsion to his students. And so he was founder of rocket and rocketry. It was a time also, so he did a small rocket and then a bigger rocket. So then they created a Hadjithomas society to make rockets, and then they started sending their rocket, and the Lebanese state said, like, look, guys, you cannot send a rocket like that. We have to be with you. So the army got involved, and little by little it started to become the Lebanese Rocket Society. And then in 1967 it ended. But it was a very serious project. The guys were really good, and they were very close to create a kind of a satellite. So we started to think about this project, and we felt it was in 2010, 2009, 2010, so a little bit before the springs. And so we wanted to question the notion of dream. Like, why did we just forget about this project? Is it something that has to do with dreams? What is this notion? Is this something that has to do with representation that we have of ourselves? And this is why, in a way, it's not possible to think about a space project today. And so, we thought that and the other thing that was very interesting for us also, it was to start to think about all those people that were Armenian living in Lebanon and wanted to give something back to Lebanon. And it was a kind of gratitude for them to do this project. But there was people from all over the region, not only Lebanon, and we liked this idea. So of course 60 is the situation, and we started finding everyone, Manouk, John, everyone was in a place in the world, and we did this film. But after we said the story, because we had to say it, we find all the archives, because we had nothing at the beginning, and then we find all the archives. We thought, like, what would happen if today we do a kind of rockets, and are we able to do like something like that? Are we able to reconstitute one of those rockets? And we started to work on this rocket and reconstitute one of them that was called Cedar 4. And with this idea of offering it to the university, the Hadjithomas University, where the story started. And so this is the rocket, but in a way we wanted also this rocket to go back, because those rockets were taken from the Hadjithomas University to Dubai and then launched from there. And we constructed this rocket, this sculpture, in Dubai. So we thought, like, oh, this should go back exactly at Hadjithomas, as at that time it was coming from Hadjithomas to Dubai. And so it was put on a truck. So we put it on a truck. So this took a lot of time, negotiation. No one would understand, like, why do you want to do that? It's dangerous. This is part of the film also.
What I also really find interesting about this Lebanese rocket society is there in the 60s, it's a so-called period of optimism before 67 in the region. But if you actually look at it, it was the height of the space race, which wasn't scientific. Well, I mean, it was scientific, but it was primarily adversarial. We had the Cuban Missile Crisis there. I think you mentioned even in Lebanon there were many GIs stationed. It is a strange thing that it was such a period of optimism, considering what was actually going on. And then you bring it back in 2009, and there's another period of optimism before. I know. It's hard to end. It hasn't ended yet, has it?
we wanted to question this idea of dreaming exactly, and this represent. It was a tribute to dreamers. What we were doing, a tribute to dreamers, or a tribute to people that could represent themselves as contemporary at the moment where they would do this space project and be linked to others, and so and of course it would question the relation to Arab utopias and to all that.
Yeah, and the other thing is that you introduce fiction in your work a lot, or you have the fictional photographer. This at first sight, when you first see it, you think it's fiction, and it turns out not to be, although you end the film on a fictional note. You end it or a science fictional note if you want.
We didn't want it to sound nostalgic, the film. So we had to say the
You're
whole
never
story.
nostalgic.
No, we don't like that. So we had to say the story because for those people, who made this project, we owe them this. So we did the first part. And then we had to revisit the story in the present. So this is why we did the sculpture.
What if?
Exactly, what if? And all this negotiation with to be able to bring back on a truck this rocket, but also this reactivation in the present of the past and see what's going to happen. We felt that it had to be followed, but an idea, something that has to do with science fiction, because space is science fiction, and in a lot of this anticipation mode. And we didn't, of course, there are some anticipation and science fiction in the airport, but not much. So we thought, like, why don't we? What would have happened if the project would have continued? If we had a satellite, maybe with the satellite we could have found the gas that is in the water, in the sea, and we could have extracted before everyone's the gas.
There would have been a war.
And there would have no war, and this kind of
rocket cars, bullet trains.
And we thought of this idea of someone imagining what would have happened if the project was not stopped by the French and the American, and so this was this idea, and we wanted to do this kind of images, this kind of science fiction images. We thought we just had this idea of seeing them, of producing them, of questioning them, because they don't give a perfect
to reinvent the narrative.
So the question in the Lebanese Rocket Society is how we reactivate the past and the present. So we found several possibilities. It can be the reconstitution of the rocket, or it can be also the restaging of the transportation of the rocket. Meaning when you saw us shipping the rocket from the factory to the university, it was really stressful because of the 220 authorization. We were afraid of being bombed by one of our neighbors or whatever. So we were producing a documentary images, meaning we were not taking our time to be able to do something. After a while, we said, what if we restage what had been reenacted? And so we bring back all the same convoy, the same cars, the same truck, but instead of putting the rocket in 3D, let's put its shape in 2D. So the satellite, drone, and other won't be afraid. Even the cars all around us won't be afraid. And let's take some images of the shipment. So so it was a trace of this past. So this is done with analog cameras, where the shutter speed depends on the speed of the convoy passing in the frame. So you can never cut it from the first time. You have to do it and redo it. So each time the convoy passes, you look with one digital camera to see if the speed was good. Ah, no, it's not good, let's repeat it. Cut the highway, bring it back, redo it, and redo it till it works.
But it also harks back to the contact sheet kind of way of working from the very beginning, if you formally think about it.
But also we did this kind of photography, but we did also a golden record, a sound piece where we reconstitute this idea of a golden record that was sent in the 70s by the NASA and imagined by Carl Sagan and is still sent as an interstellar bottle to see if there's like a message to aliens.
To explain humanity.
And the choices that were made in this golden record, we thought like that we're not very present as Arabs, so let's do our own golden records. And so we did this golden record with sound of the 60s that are based in the memories of the people that dreamt of space from the Lebanese Rocket Society. And little by little also we start to do, we did a carpet because we felt that those people were born from orphans that came to Lebanon and or to Jordan or to other places, and those orphans, Armenians, had to do something. They had to be able to produce something to live, and so that a lot of people were doing carpets. Girls are doing carpets, and so we thought of doing a tribute to those people also that gave something to Lebanon, and we did this project about the carpet that would take the stamp that was the first thing that we saw from this Lebanese rocket project. And this
it was more about gratitude because of the Armenian girls in 1923 made this the biggest carpet they can do and the most beautiful one to offer it with the White House, because all this program was financed at that time by Near East Relief. So they offer it to the President of the United States, and this is the President of the United States receiving it. And it's written, it's in gratitude to President Khalil. So this idea of gratitude is something that we would like to continue because it's a gratitude to those dreamers. The Lebanese Rocket Society became Lebanese by gratitude by those Armenians, because they were not Lebanese actually. This is what was incredible. So the whole project on this, but also always this idea of missing images. We noticed also during the project that all the photographers were missing the takeoff. They missed the takeoff. I don't know why, but maybe because there was not a good counter or no motor at that time. So we went back on the fin, because on the fin you have the sequence, and from the fin we decided to take several frames and to make a modelization of the moment where the rocket was going out of the frame. So what you are seeing here actually is not a picture, it's a sculpture. If you look at it carefully, you will notice that it's a sculpture. So we decided to give a physicality to what was missing. In our work is not good in presentation like this, because it's an experience by itself. It means that you can't see it, you have like 180 seconds. If you are too far or too close, you are always missing something. So it's an experience, it's a physical experience that you have to live. So you see here how it is. Actually, it's a block of plexi that is routed and then polished, and it was fun to do.
It was also this idea to give a virtuality to dust, to missing image, but also to re-question the trace, what is left.
And you're back to Steglitz as well.
We're back to, yes, it's true.
What are you working on now?
Do you want to talk about this as well?
Yes.
Conformity.
Okay.
You want to talk about the project that we...
As you want.
You want us to talk about what is shown here or not really?
I think that
Okay. So we started the project around poetry because we were asked first to do something around Cavafy, Constantin Cavafy, and a video this was asked to us, and we thought about it, and we felt that Cavafy is telling us something, because he was like a Greek living in Alexandria all his life. He was one of the, is considered as one of the best Greek poets without living there. And we liked this idea first, and then when we started looking at his poem, there was this poem about barbarians called Waiting for the Barbarians, and we thought about it, and this was at the beginning where we had like all this ISIS and happening and Daesh in Lebanon, and we're like, what's happening? And so we started doing this because we felt this between all those wars that were and all the instability, insecurities, all the chaos that we were facing, we felt we need poetry, maybe something is needed.
Okay. Why poetry? It's not just we need poetry. It's when they were using the word, everybody was using the word barbarians. So we went again to see the meaning of barbarian, especially for a guy like Cavafy. In the Greek Empire at that time, a barbarian was not a person from another religion or another race or something. It was just somebody who was not able to talk in Greek. So the opposite of this are the person who are working on the language. So they are the poets. This is why poetry can be maybe one of the best tools to face this barbarian. Meaning the poet, like Joana was saying in the shortcuts, was for us a very important need at that time. So again, something we start to work on this idea about territory. Like in I Want to See, where territory was not anymore a geography, like in the Lebanese market society, like Cavafy, who is one of the most important Greek poets without any going to Greece. This idea of a shared territory where it won't be anymore a geography, but it will be a temporality. And this is the idea of being contemporary, like meaning sharing the same time. When we were talking about the space project, Manu was contemporary of what was happening in the USSR or in the US at the same time, because they were feeling the same concern. You are contemporary with us, not because we are Arab, because we are sharing the same issue. Of course, Arab is something else, especially in front of Marwan al-Ismawi. But we are talking about something, sometimes we feel closer from somebody who's in Korea than than your neighbors. It's because we are sharing the same concern. So this idea of an accumulation of temporality actually is the same view than in Circle of Confusion or in another work that we made called Distracted Bullets, about the stray bullets, which is a view of Beirut. But in this view, we start to accumulate different temporalities, to superpose different temporalities. If you see here in photography, you have different shutter speeds, each one that are all accumulating. So you have half a second, quarter of a second, and different movement inside the picture, which is also animated by the videos. So all this accumulation of temporality generates this contemporaneous.
Formally, what we wanted to do is to take those pictures that are made by 60 or 70 other pictures that are superposed, and to do like kind of travelings on those pictures. So to do an animated video or an animated photography, something like that. We were trying, and then we took some videos, specific videos, and we put them in this picture. So you look at a photo that is animated, and this idea of mobility, stillness, and movement was at the center of this.
And uncertainty as a viewer, you never know what you're.
Exactly, questioning the perspective of the is something that we are very interested, because we don't like this idea of certitude, of showing of messages. It's just a proposition we are showing in these three works that are shown here. We have a proposition of trying to share a poetry or a question like what happened to colors when they are in the water, and this idea of remembering the light came because we were very depressed but all what was happening, and we were like at a moment like we need light. And then suddenly we felt, because we are diverse, both of us, we felt that this idea of when colors disappears when you are under the water, when you go down. But if you really go down, and there's no colors, and you open a light and you remove the light, suddenly colors are back. And even when you remove the light, the plankton remembers the lights and continue to reflect it, as we can see in those in those two videos. So, and we did 2 screens because first we wanted people to wear colors and to go down. So we took professional divers and we did this video that was really very complicated. But of course they were telling us another story. No one was interested in colors here. There was people that were saying a story about migrations and all what was happening. So we took really a kind of scarf that we found that was like with many colors, as much colors as we could have, and we made her drawn in the exact same places where those people went, and in the sea of Beirut there's a lot of things as you can see down, and so and so it was a kind of hunting traces, and little by little this scarf was a very good actress, so we followed her, and you can see the colors disappearing, and so it's kind of questioning about and hope a little bit that colors come back.
And then you have the Smyrna
the
project, which is quite personal.
The Smyrna project was a project that we were working on for many years, and it was, of course, so it gives for, as you all know, Adnan is a great poet and a great artist. And when we met Etel and me, we at the moment where we met, we had these feelings that we had to do something together, because her mother was Greek from Izmir, and her father was Syrian from an officer of the Ottoman Empire. So their situation at the moment was very difficult. And at another moment, and my grandfather was a Greek from Izmir that had to leave, and we lived, Etel and me, in those stories and those transmissions. So we wanted to do something about that. And when.
But it was not just, it was again linked to something that is very deep. Because this was an imaginary without images, because none of them, neither her or somebody of their family, never came back to Izmir. But they nevertheless grow up and in the transmission of certain imaginaries.
It's an inherited narrative that gets passed down. And
you have to go and see the film. It's here.
Yeah, we're not going to explain it, but for us it was also very interesting. This film was shot during 4 years. You have the feeling that it's happened in 2 afternoon conversation, but actually this is the kind of thing that you are learning by doing it, by editing in the same time, because you are discovering, you don't know where it leads. Joana discovered even, she never noticed that Etel and her were in opposite sides, but both are sharing this missing city.
Missing city.
Can you show us what made you win the Marcel Duchamp project? Do you have images of the project?
I think we're getting there now.
اوكي ليش ما ماشي الفيديو؟ طيب حفرجيكم الفيديو. I'm gonna go out and go in. ما تطلعوا على الشاشة دقيقة.
It started with this work that we've been researching. It started with a friend who is an engineer and specialized in scoring. So scoring is when you have to do reconstruction or a construction on the site, you have to dig and to do some course to see what is the friability, or how is it stable, is it good, you can construct them. So this is what he does. And he was always trying to explain what he does, and no one is really very interested. And suddenly, on one day, we just listened to him and thought, like, he was saying that he could to be able to see if the land is able to have a construction, he has to go really after all what is human traces to the geology. And so we thought, like, wow, this is really incredible. He really goes very deep. And this is how they make it. So they dig, they put water, they remove the soil and stones, they put it in boxes, and those boxes are studied, analyzed, and then after a few months they just throw them. And so we started taking picture of them because we felt like, wow, this is really interesting, because after 6, 7, 8 meters so you start with today, and then you dig a little bit, and more you dig, more and more you go through history of civilization, and then you arrive to geology. But of course we didn't really understand them and couldn't read them. But by accident there was a guy just in front of our house, an archaeologist that made a big discovery of in Beirut, and so he was the sites where there had a construction was stopped, and so we met, and little by little we discovered that one of our cores was taken in this site. So he explained to us, like, here, you know, he started to say all the story, and he said, but look, in this picture, I cannot really read the picture. I have to, you have to do drawings. So we did some drawings with historian, archaeologists, geologists, and suddenly we felt like, wow, we are in a way telling the story of the city.
Actually, it was very interesting because it was dealing also with the writing of the history. We always understand in Lebanon, you always hear in Lebanon that it's a city, Beirut at least, a city that had been destroyed 7 times and rebuilt 8. And in our imaginary, it's a layering. So you have like all the layers, one over the other. But actually in archaeology, it's not like that it's working. It's even in instead of layers, they will talk about actions. Because one action can have different consequences on several layers. The easiest one is solidaire. Okay, with solidaire, you will have the new that will be deep and the old that will be up. So the construction is upside down. Yeah. Here, something start to interrogate us, because when you dig, when you core, actually you put a lot of water. So as you saw in the beginning, it becomes always mud, so you can really see nothing. But because it's a real estate project, and it's a place where we know by historian and that there's several traces of occupation, there will be a research by the archaeologists. So they will be able to study this specific land and to start to understand what is in the core. So this core has been resculpted to be able to see what was inside it. If I go back just a minute here, you see it goes, because of the water, it's completely covered by mud. Okay? And when you see them in this, okay, I can tell you a little bit about certain stories that we through the encounter with different archaeologists, geologists, little by little we start to understand what was under our feet.
And of course, it addresses a lot of things. We started to be very fascinated by the cycles of destruction and reconstruction. That is the same wall is built and destroyed and reused, and the same stone. So sometimes you have like hundreds of years in a very small samples, and others you have like there's kind of vertigo that you are. And you feel it, and there is a materiality to it, so it becomes very interesting, and a latency, of course, and
okay, I'm gonna, for example, on this one, you see between 2 meters 25 and 3 meters, you see a kind. Of course, you can't see anything on here, but you see a kind of.
Grid. Grid?
Actually, small stones that come from the sea. Actually, this is a tsunami that happened in Lebanon in 400. When you see it like this, if you don't, somebody tell you, suddenly you realize what it is. If not, you cannot see.
And we thought like there is a lot of questions that we have to deal with as artists. First, as artists, you have, or filmmakers, you have to say the whole story. So but also you have to give the details. So this macro, micro change of scales were very interesting to us also in this. And then we felt that we need to, it would be great. We had this vision one day that it would be great to have those scores, but not like we see them, but we see them vertically, and we can go like how do you say that, like to go through ages and to look at time like that. But it had to be very. So we started to take those stones and to bring them in studios and to try to resculpt them with archaeologists and geologists. And for this project in Duchamp, when we were nominated, we decided to do 3 cities, Beirut, Athens, and Paris, because there was 3 cities where we work, where we have like very strong links. And we were also interested in this idea that Beirut, okay, we all say there's no history. Athens, there's no shared history or common history. In Athens, there is this archaeology that is so present in our minds. And in Paris, we wanted to understand this history. And suddenly we felt that, in a way, it was telling us something else about how we say history.
What we did is, because we are not genius, we have to collect a lot of things. We cannot find everything in one borehole. You have to collect a lot of boreholes, and through the research that happened in this specific place with the archaeologists, and we are able to reconstitute the narrative that they managed to find, what they call a log, meaning a concentration of all the stories in one. So it starts with a lot of documentation, the work of historians. So you see, this is some samples of the cores that we need to do just a few ones, because you have to search inside each element to be able to reconstitute and resketch. These are the documents that we have to look. Each one is a borehole, what we can find, the documentation, and little by little we built. And then, when we finished all this, as Joana was saying, we want to put it we want them to be floating as another experience. So we had to you see, for example, you have to destroy certain element to be able to find fragment of terracotta, of pottery, because it's never there. It's never obvious. So to invent this resin, we went to work with a lab and made a lot of tests to be able to create this materiality without bubble, without fracking, and It's loud.
Have you heard the installation?
Yeah. So all these were the different experimentation. That's it.
Here we are showing like these three cities, and we are, of course, when you have stories on the wall, and you can see. So you have photography, drawing, possible narratives. That is things that we kept from all the stories of the archaeologists and geologists, and you go through those cities and the underground of those cities, and of course it addresses also the impact today of men on geology, what is called Anthropocene, and nature, and what's happening today, and how we're going to deal with this. So in a way, it was for us exploring a kind of past to understand more what's going to happen today. And the project is called Unconformities because it's a kind of rupture. And this kind of rupture, its unconformity is in a geological terms, where when two fragments that didn't have to meet after a catastrophe, and it's a regeneration. So this is, and it's also a halt in time, a gap in time where you don't know what happened, a jump cut. There's something, there's no trace of it, but it gives a regeneration.
And as a project, it almost seems to bring all your previous work together the elements of latency, the contact sheets, the going deep in the remembering the light. Now you're going deep into the earth, the telling of stories that official narratives are not telling, or not willing to tell, or not able to tell, and again the fragility.
Yeah, it was really a very difficult project and very fragile. It exploded, some of them just 15 days before the opening, and
literally
exploded because of the resin, but after we found a solution. But it was a very hard project to make. But also, it's true that you're not searching for something, but at the moment it brings everything.
Brings it all together. Now, the exhibition we're holding here as a quote, "Truth is black," right over it with "A mirage is light," which comes from Grej's in a poem to a young poet. And based on that, we asked young artists here how to pause and reflect, how to reimagine our world, how to reinvent their narratives. If there's anything you would say to the young artists starting now here, what would that be?
Yeah, young artists.
I think that there is I have a lot of problems giving advices and definitions, as you understand, but in a way I would say freedom. And always a question of necessity, to understand why it's necessary for me to do that now, and to take all the paths that I can find and follow encounters. And this is how, in a way, you don't really understand how you go. You think you are going in another direction, and you come back to what you were searching for. This is always very interesting, and not to be afraid of format and formatting, and to do a film, then to do a sculpture, a painting, a performance, whatever they want. They don't have to define themselves. They just have to do what they want, what they feel, what is necessary for them, what is sincere. And you know, I grew up in kind of culture where I didn't know any artist and any filmmakers. My parents didn't like art especially, and when I started dreaming, I censored myself. I said, like, you're no one, you know no one, you never do something. And then I tried to do it, and I went to France to study, and there was this guy who told me, you know, it's impossible. You will never get and you will never do a film. Go and work in television or something. You're and I think that this is things that people tell you, that you won't be able to do it, and you won't make it, and just do it and make what you want. This is only what I would say.
I think that's wonderful.
And their own way, just their own way, and to never take impossibility as a possibility.
Actually, Darwish himself in the poem goes, "From now on, your only guardian is a neglected future." That's what he gives to the end. Are there any questions from the audience? Would you like to
translate اوكي. تعرفون العربية؟
ترجم شوي.
والكام.
أنا ساعدني إني حضرت الفيلم في ثلاثاء سابق تبع نادي الصواريخ اللبناني. أنا مررت بالصدفة، كان اللي عمل هون، تعرفت على الدار هون المؤسسة، وفتت وقالوا لي اليوم بنشاط، قلت إن شاء الله راح أحضر. وصرني الموضوع إنه في قياسا في الجو العام في نوع من الشجاعة المفتقرة خلينا نقول، أو غير الواردة بتناول هيك المواضيع التي يعني الشجاعة الطبيعية هي اللي لازم تكون في تناول المواضيع العلمية. فقلت للأخوات شو الموضوع المحاضرة، فقاعدين يتذكر إنه الإداريين يعني، فكان عن موضوع الصواريخ، وفتحنا اللابتوب يعني حتى يزداد الموضوع. قلت حلو كثير يعني، راح أحضر إن شاء الله. أنا هلا بعدة نقاط إنه أرجو إنه تركزوا عليها. هلا النقطة الأولى، أنا حضرت الفيلم. بالنسبة للغة الأجنبية أو التحدث وكذا، أنا أفضل إن كنت أجيد 100 لغة، فأفضل أن أتحدث بلغة البلد الذي أكون فيه ضيفا أو غير صفة. ليش؟ اوكي، انا لما قالت انا كويستشن ما حدا قال شيء، فانا خفت تروحوا يعني، ما بدي. اوكي، انا بفتح لكم المجال يعني. اوكي، بشكل سريع جدا، بشكل سريع جدا، لانه انا بالنسبه للتحدث بالاخوه الغربيين اللي بيتحدثوا بالانجليزيه، هم يتوقون الى الاحتكاك للتحدث بالعربيه، فاحنا نيجي نقول لهم نتحدث بلغتكم. المساله الاولى بالفيلم انه موضوع جدا مهم تناوله. لاحظت فقط بالشاشه، ما بعرف هو من اصل الفيلم او غيره، لاحظت بالشاشه كان في تشويش وما بيوضوح بالصوت، سواء حضرتكم تكلمتوا بالعربيه خلالها، ما بعرف مين كان المعلق بالضبط يعني حضرتكم بالضبط. انا شفتكم مع الوزير بارود ومع غيره وكذا بالمسائل عم تتحدثوا بالعربيه، ليش كنتوا تتحدثوا بالعربيه؟ فما كان بوضوح. ما بعرف النسخه الاصليه، النسخه الاصليه من هون ما بعرف. هلا في سؤال بالنسبه انا لقدت بعض المسائل بالنسبه لمحادثتكم او اللقاء اللي اجرته العزيزه هون، انه التجارب الصاروخيه كانت انه قلت لها انه سقطت بالبحر، ويعني احتجت الجهات الغربيه انه راح يعني كادت ان تصيب السفينه. العزيزه هون قالت لك ممكن تقع على بناء او سياره. لا، مش بهالبساطه، كانت مدروسه التجارب، انا حضرتها مدروسه وكذا ومسائل، حتى كادت تقع على سفينه لم تثبت بالاساس.
هو تحكي عن غير شيء، انا عارفه شو عم بدك تقول، رح اقول لك انت عم تحكي عن غير شيء. هيدي القصه يلي تخبرت. هلا بعدين ليه وقفوها هون؟ هيدي غير شيء. نحن بنوحي بالفيلم يعني بنبلش نقول انه توقف المشروع لاسباب اكيد سياسيه.
بالضبط. انا ساعطيكم هي اكثر من سياسيه، هي سياسيه بما تعني.
لو سمحت بس اذا في سؤال
السؤال
في اشخاص ثانيين بيستنوا يسالوا بس.
بالضبط. هون بالنسبه للمساله العلميه هي تراكميه عند كل البشر، اذا اتيح المجال انه، بس بدي انا منكم طلب شخصي ان تشتغلوا على فيلم وثائقي، وراح تشوفوا كم العلماء في المنطقه هاي من الكره الارضيه اللي بيمنعوا من اتمام مشاريعهم، وتلتقوا بهم شخصيا مش بس البروفيسور والاخ العزيز يعني صاحب الفكره الاساسيه في نادي الصواريخ اللبناني. وانا وقفت على حقيقتين، الفرق بيننا وبين الاخوه في الغرب.
انا معلش لازم اقاطعك اذا ما في
لا بس هي سؤال مباشره
مش الحال
مباشره.
وهلا اذا بدك فينا كمان بعدين نكمل الحديث
اكيد
وتخبرنا اكثر عن
بس من
فكرتك.
باب الفائده الجماعيه انه الفارق الاساسي انه هون يمنع
فهمت عليك،
يمنع الاعلان عن الفكر ويمنع افساح المجال له. الغرب عبر سلطاته تطلب من المواطنين الإعلان عن الفكرة وتتيح المجال لها وتستغلها ضد بقية الشعوب. هذا الفارق، وهم مستضعفون في السياسة مثلنا تماما ويستغبون وإلى الآن.
بعدين نحن كنا
يعني هاي تماما الدم العلمائي تبع المنطقة هاي تبع الكرة الأرضية من يومين أريق في ماليزيا. بروفيسور جامعي فكر وغير.
أنا بعرض عليك شيء، إذا في سؤال باخده نجرب أو سؤال أو اثنين وبعدين بنحكي سوا وبنحكي عن هالموضوع وبنعرض. بس هيدا مشروع أكيد مهم، برجع نحكي عن الموضوع بعدين. يعني بركي ما لازم تصير نخبرهم، بركي بيسرقوا لنا الفكرة كمان.
حقي حق. شكرا.
Hi, thank you very much for a great talk. I found the film that you guys discovered in your uncle's material to be kind of like the perfect metaphor for your entire kind of career. Heavily based on research and this idea of kind of archival digging, you know, and kind of finding answers to questions that kind of keep you engaged in a topic until you get like bored with it and you go, oh, like until you answer certain things and you move on to others. But what I found also to be really fascinating about it is sort of this combination and the rupture between the archival, the real, the trace, but also the ambivalence, the ambiguity, and almost in many of your more kind of performative pieces, almost the deliberate obfuscation. Where you discover the answers, but you kind of twist them before you present them to us. And I think, I mean, congratulations on that, because I think the poetry or the magic is precisely in that obfuscation. But does that come from your experience of the war, and this sort of upbringing, where in a way, kind of the rug was constantly pulled from under your feet? And it's kind of a commentary on life and how we can never kind of access truths or kind of reality, or is it a Duchampian gesture in a way, like a typical art movement, our gesture where we always kind of introduce that twist and kind of leave it for the viewer to perceive whatever they want?
I don't like to relate all what I am because of the wars. Meaning, of course, the war structured me, but it's not defining me. And there's even an attempt for a certain person to try to always to define us by being the generation of the post-war, dealing with the issue of the post-war. Actually, I'm not interested, as I told you, by the war, but what the war affected, even in the storytelling, how a character can be here. What is the notion of hero as a character is by itself complex, especially when you are suspicious about these figures. You are suspicious about the causality that are in narration, something very simple, like you do something wrong, you will be punished. In Lebanon, it's not always the case. You do something wrong, you can become rich or minister. So, meaning that by itself you have to work on the specificity, on the singularity of certain situations. So for me, this relation, this twist that you are talking about is maybe coming from a suspicious position about the power. more than or the definitions. From the beginning, we are always trying to escape the definition. Being truth, yeah.
Message.
We are not into communication at all. Like, meaning in communication, I was talking with Soha about how art is being taught in Lebanon. It's most of the time in communication department, which is exactly the opposite for me than arts. In the communication, you know who is talking to whom, you know the message, and you know even the ways that you have to deal with it. While in an artist, and this is why we loved Carl Sagan, you don't know who you are most of the time. You don't know to whom you are going to talk. You don't know your subject very well, and you have to invent a new form. It has nothing to do with communication. There's a misunderstanding on this.
But it's also, I think there's some, Khalil and me, we try to really research something, see? So it's very linked to our life, usually. If you see, all our projects are linked to our life, to a question that we have at a certain moment. We don't take ourselves very seriously. You know, this is very important because today but we are deeply moved by some questions. We are, things are, burning, and we want to reflect our reality or or the place where we live, but we don't want to reflect it in a way that could please anyone. We want to reflect it in a way where there's always a question that we have. If I know an answer, I'm not interested. And see, it has to have like a real questioning that I'm sharing with you. But I cannot only share my despair, I have to share also a question and possible poetic or something that I feel moving, important, and also a new form of something, a new way to look at a new perspective. So this is why you have this twist that you're talking about, because it's like always there's a reality that you have to take somewhere else, and then you take it somewhere else, you have to retwist it. This is why our work takes a lot of different forms. It's not because we are searching for something, when you find it, we search as something else, and it leads us to something else. This is why with Eileen, when she asked us the question of the fragility, it's a very important question, because I think we have to lose control when we are searching for something. And this, when you lose control, you find things in your way. And it's like once you open the Pandora box, everything happens to you. It's like that, and you just have to look at it, and you have to accept it, because, for example, you're shooting a film. This is more relevant in an artwork, because you have a whole crew, and you have you have to shoot this and this and this that day. But something happened that is more interesting, so you have to follow. Usually, you can't do it, but we try to invent alternative systems that make it possible for us to follow it. You see, so. And this produces something else. It's like encounters, accidents, and produce something else, and you just look at it.
And most of the time, each project leads us to a new place. That is, if you follow a little bit our trajectory, it is full of contradiction. Actually, the Duchamp Prize lead us to exactly the opposite from our starting point. Meaning, in Lebanon, when we started to work, as I told you, we were facing the fact that we were considering that violence was one of the issues that was enabling us to write our history. With the Duchamp Prize, because we worked on Paris, Beirut, and Atina, we ended by noticing that the history of Beirut is today much more known than the other history, because of the destruction of the city, because all the real estate projects destroyed the city. They were able to produce the information and the data.
So what do you say with that?
Today, the history of Beirut is much more.
What you want to say, but it's here.
The history of Beirut is today much more known than the history of Paris. the history of now, the last research, they are not even sure that Paris was in Paris. You see, maybe it was in Nanterre. It's unbelievable. Where in Beirut, the history of Beirut was completely rewritten the last 10 years because of the destruction, because of the regeneration that it's producing.
Maybe there is an Abdallah Farah somewhere.
And I just want to say something. I don't know if it's a question or maybe just because I want to share it's a beautiful presentation. Do you feel, there's something about this urge, this desire to preserve latency, to protect it, to protect latency itself? Latencies. To protect it, to conserve, maybe perhaps you're doing a conservation for it. Perhaps because of its energy, from what I see and what you know now regarding the project for the Duchamp Prize, whether it has a certain energy, a certain, let's keep it with energy, to reappropriate the narrative, and what Joana was talking about.
What was interesting with latency, it's like for us we stopped working on latency in 2006, because in 2006 we thought like we have to go out of the latency after the war between Israel and Lebanon. And why did we thought that? Because, for example, latency for us, it was a possibility of sharing. I write what I'm filming or I'm taking picture, and it's up to you to see it, to read it, to imagine it, or there was this possibility of shared narrative. We are together, we work together, we want to share narrative. This idea of sharing. And we stopped this for a moment, and we conceived other ideas that, of course, you can read them as possible continuation of latency, but for us it was more like questioning. With Revoir, it was really something very violent about fiction, documentary. You never know when it starts, when it's ends, like really blurring limits of what is a message, what is militant, what is not, what is engaged, all that. But when we did this conformity project, we arrived in Athens. It was a huge project that we did in a very short time. Even if we did research, a lot of research before, suddenly we had to hurry to do this project, to find forms, to understand three cities, archaeologists, geologists, and then you have this incredible geologist in Athens that did all the subways, the course of all the subway of Athens, and as I have, because there's a lot of things that happen like that in your life, they want to just destroy all those cores in a month, to throw them. And so we arrived, and she made them, so she knows exactly where we have to resculpt and do them. And she starts talking, and so she described it, and then she said latency, or like, what is she talking about? Said like, a little bit our work. She said, a little bit, but not much. She continues, catastrophe, regeneration, suspension, persistent in time and space. I was like, okay, we are doomed in a way to those notions. And it's true that here you have, in those unconformities, there's latency of history, because we cannot say history. It's not important to say the facts, because we're not historians. Others, it's their job, they will do it. What we can say is raise those questions and propose shared narratives. There are narratives that can be shared.
I will understand your questions in a different way. But start with what Joana was saying. Of course, when you are haunted by something, even if you try to be delivered by this ghost, it will keep some time haunting you back. Like, I'm not into latency anymore. Meaning, it's not a choice. It's just that latency, there's a hope, usually in latency, that certain condition will come where you will go out of this latency. Jalal Toufi was talking about Abdallah Farah, and he was wondering in which condition latency, Abdallah Farah will reveal his images. What will happen in the society, in the photography, in his mind, where he will decide to reveal those images. In 2006, after the detention camp of Khiam was completely destroyed, we have been invited to do something, an exhibition. And at that moment, we say, in 2000, when the detention camp was dismantled and the Sahel army withdrew, we went to Khiam, we took pictures there. But at that moment, it was so fashionable to take images that we didn't develop them. We kept them latent in one of the drawers. Okay? No need that we went there because we want to see, but no need to see them because it was everywhere. Okay? In 2006, suddenly we remember those films. We said, are this the condition to make them, to develop those films, those specific films? And because the camp was destroyed. Okay. And we realized that if we do it, it will be by nostalgia, like a fetishism of what is missing, like the missing reality will bring back those kind of images, where here, in terms of images, it was not any more interesting for us. So in it's not what is missed that bring back the latency. It's exactly the opposite. It's a hope that an image will find the condition of its appearance. And after the war of 2006,
but it's both, because you have the visibility and visibility. You know, this is what art is about also, film. So it's a trace and an absence. It's a shot, a counter shot and a shot. It's always this relation. So latency is just a possible promise of a poetry, but it's all about what you make visible and all what you leave invisible in a way. What is and those scores are exactly the same, but it's just a sample.
And just I want to tell you, because
and there's a lot of things that are lost.
You remember?
I see a lot of absence.
A lot of absence.
Yeah.
A lot of absence because of the water. You lose a lot, and with the resin. Yeah.
I mean, you did a very good job of that, because I mean, there's this resin.
Yeah, the resin is really clear like water, and so it's totally fragile. So it's
like you put
yeah, it's amplifying. So when you go there, you see, like, you have the feeling that everything is gonna fall all the time, but you have stones that are in suspension, soil, other, but it's not falling. But there's a lot of gaps,
In this presentation, we take out a whole body of work that you know quite well. It's all the projects that happened after 2006, actually, about the images with the project faces, the other projects, where actually in the project faces, it's the image of the martyrs that is supposedly going to stay because we took their images. But they are put in certain places where the weather and the time will erase their faces. Because actually it's a promise that we cannot do. The promise of time, of perpetuation, of transmission is a very difficult question, which is another perspective in our work. All our work is about transmission. What can you transmit? You cannot transmit the latency.
And you also do not produce latency.
No, it's a state of fact. It's an axiom.
Unless you intend to invent it.
But you cannot invent a latency.
But you did. You've done a few projects.
No.
We don't,
No.
it didn't happen. If you want to know how it happens, it was...
No, we had this practice during years.
With Khalil,
It's a little bit lazy, so we had a lot of... We took... we took all those pictures, but he didn't go to develop them, you know, and I don't drive. So he had to go to the lab. And so I was like, okay, we have to write, well, because we're gonna forget, okay? So we started writing dates and then story, and then this is when we went to this place, and this is our story. And starting writing them, we thought like, this is really interesting. And so this is how it happened.
But we have no need to develop it also. It's very important. Like, at that time, I was taking like 20 films per day.
He's obsessive, it seems.
Okay, so I was going street by street. This day, one street, the other day, another street. You know, a lot of artists do this.
But maybe it's not interesting what is in the rules.
No, precisely. And for me, that's a representation of latency.
Yeah.
Your choice not to develop the photographs is your choice to keep them hidden. But the project itself is a representation of the idea of latency.
It's true. But now, after after now 12 years, or more for some of the roles, because we started in '97, I suppose that most of them
You can't even develop anymore.
are really latent in a way that's not the condition of their visibility.
We never know if you really took your pictures.
Of course.
It could be
Did we
fiction.
really took all the pictures that we pretend to?
It was
Is there any last question? Because I think we've had a...
It's a very
Or shall we just say thank you?
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
وأنا بصحاب اسمع